Good morning, everyone. Thank you to our attendees that are joining us for our webinar on Demystifying the Move to Business Central. My name is Travis Brooks, and I'm an account manager here at Copus within our ERP division, and I'll be your moderator today. I also have fellow ERP account manager Heather Mitchell joining us, as well as Adam Drews, who leads our ERP team. If you're not familiar with Copus, we were founded in 1999 and we are a Microsoft partner for Dynamics Great Plains and Dynamics Business Central for any ERP implementation, customization, and support. We are also a provider for custom software development for internal and external applications for web and mobile, as well as a business intelligence practice focused on SQL servers, data warehouses, and visualizing through dashboards like Power BI. I'd like to introduce you to the General Manager of Copus ERP, Adam Drews. Adam, I'll pass it on to you.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining. Today we're going to talk about potentially moving to Business Central. So what does that look like for most organizations? Why do they choose to go? When do they choose? And kind of the whole process. So in the previous webinar, we kind of talked about three different buckets of organizations, broad buckets of those who want to maximize the investment that they made into GP, those that are sort of looking and maybe planning for future move, and those that are really, maybe planning a little bit more soon to evaluate moving and actually moving forward with a Business Central move. Um, you know, we as an organization are supporting all three of those categories, and this particular webinar is probably the aimed most at those last two, the one that's the organization that might be planning a future move, evaluating, and those that are kind of in process. So we'll go over a couple of different things today. So we have a little bit of a packed schedule, but there's lots of places where this is going to, some things are going to be different for each organization. So I'm happy to answer questions along the way. Good, good, good discussion options. Like Travis mentioned, the accounts team is made up of the three of us, and we're happy to help your organization and strategize, schedule time with consultants, and kind of uncover what you're looking to do and why. So kind of at the very, let's maybe back up on what is Business Central or Dynamics 365 Business Central. It's a hefty name, so you'll hear us call it Business Central a lot, and we'll do our best not to say BC. But as you all know, in the Great Plains world, we all got pretty quickly to GP. One of the big differences about Business Central compared to Dynamics GP is that it's web-based. In general, sort of the customization path is built for cloud first. So as Microsoft shifted from so Business Central is built on top of their Dynamics NAV product or Navision, and so as that platform evolved, customization has long been a big part of that story and that platform. And so when they went to a cloud first platform, customization, they wanted to make sure that that companies could, if they chose to, they didn't have to, could still do some good customizations where it wasn't going to affect the ability for Microsoft to continue to do upgrades. So the upgrade process, which we'll get into a little bit later, that's been a very key and for my background is software development. So that part has been near and dear to my heart, and it's a pretty great platform for that. And also integrations are a little bit different. So it is a little bit more of a modern integration. So if you've heard of APIs, that's how we traditionally will integrate with Business Central as a kind of a long-term, like kind of maybe best practice. But there's definitely lots of other great ways to integrate with Business Central. If you're familiar with Smart Connect, that works for Business Central. There are file upload capabilities for like Excel templates, which makes and that doesn't require programming. So that's one great way to do some quick wins or some very simple integration. So a lot of power there. So some other maybe key things that are a little bit different about uh, GP and Business Central. One of like the really core functional differences is how Business Central uh, does its chart of accounts. And so in the GP world, we have our fully qualified. So we have our natural account, and then we have our various segments. And those segments are used, much like dimensions are, to slice and dice our chart of accounts and the data in our general ledger, so that we can do better reporting. Um, Dimensions, in my opinion, and the feedback we get from our consultants and our clients, uh, dimensions do give you some pretty nice capabilities when compared to fully qualified segments or fully qualified chart of count. Um, One is in the dimension scenario, as you can see in the screenshot, we can actually have a defined hierarchy that allows us to report. So if I'm tagging my transactions with, say, America South, dimension value 80, I can actually roll that up into a report right in Business Central to find out, maybe sales across of America. And so those types of things make it easy. The rules for when you need to apply a dimension or don't need to apply a dimension or suggested dimensions, those are really powerful as well. So Copus uses Business Central, and we enforce a business unit on all of our income statement accounts. And then we have a few accounts where we track our R&D projects, and those require an R&D dimension value. So, in the GP world, we'd have maybe zeros in all of our other accounts for that R&D segment, whereas we just don't have to put it in the Business Central world for that dimension value. One of the other cool things that our consultants and our clients love is the subledgers are they don't get uh, out of sync with the general ledger, and you can even post right through. So I've got this is a recurring general ledger, but recurring or regular general ledger, where you might see here with the account type, traditionally, yeah, we might be posting to a GL account, but I actually could post a line, I could change that to invoice, and I would be uh, uh, inputting a customer, and I can post a line through the customer ledger into the general ledger, all in one single line balance transaction. And that's pretty neat, because some of those recurring things that are super simple that you don't want to put into a full invoice document, you can do so right here in the general journal, and it keeps things simple. Also, you can upload for things that are maybe even larger. You can upload Excel, edit in Excel, so that general journal becomes super powerful. Stuck batches. We have a far more robust SQL-based transactional system, and so um, I would say that on average, I see uh, the number of locks that I ever see in Business Central compares to, say, like our custom dev, where someone's got a long running job and it's got a lock on the table, and that's the only time we see these types of things. So the quantity of sessions that we ever have to I think we don't have to go into the database and delete things like, to unstick a batch in the GP world. We can just go up here to the sessions. We can terminate a session. That can be done by an admin on your side, so you have a lot of power without touching anything, under the hood. So it's a very capable and modern, uh, based on SQL Server. In fact, it's based on Azure SQL Server. So it is a cloud first SQL deployment, and you get all of the benefits of the Azure SQL platform, including things like point in time recovery for I think 28 days. So it's a very robust um, backend system. The other thing that we see is that in two particular areas, we saw in GP the project accounting module. Jobs is a kind of a standalone module, and it's great because you can manage projects within jobs. You can choose, things like your whip method and all that kind of great, like powerful job uh, tracking. You can also even, if you're, what we saw sometimes in the GP world is project accounting might be a little bit too hefty, and so tracking on a dimension could be very useful, and that's one thing that Copus does. Like for our R&D projects, um, we track our that with simply a dimension rather than a full job. So some pretty powerful capabilities there. And then Business Central does have a full warehouse management. So um, all the documents that you would associate with movements within the warehouse, and if you are distributor or use warehousing in the GP world, uh, SalesPad, or now known as Cavallo, is producing some really powerful software that sits on top of Business Central. Their workflow engine, the Sales Monitor, so it's been rebranded in the Business Central world. That has become super powerful and much easier to even set up on your own. So we're really excited about that. So what are some of the differences on the infrastructure side? So Business Central is a software as a service. So uh, behind the scenes, you're not, whether it's an MSP partner or your own internal staff. There aren't server admins. There are no physical machines or virtual machines to manage. No hardware. Um, Backups, you have the point in time backups. There are additional backup things you could do, and that's a choice that you can make to have some kind of cold storage. Um, and then the other side is upgrade costs. So we since Business Central is a software as a service, we'll get into kind of the upgrade process in just a minute. One of the things that, as we've evolved as an organization, providing support and maintenance to and strategy to our clients, we've built into our support plans assistance in upgrading. So that means that as you do upgrades, which happen twice a year, Copus covers that with you for no additional cost. Um, we also have some pretty robust support plans that make things a little bit more predictable than maybe the ad hoc support plans that many on-premise and GP clients are used to. So that's something that's different as well. So specifically on the upgrades, Business Central typically releases, or Microsoft typically releases a minor update every month. So we go from 20.0 to 20.1, 20.1 to 20.2, pretty much every month. Those are generally speaking non-breaking changes. Most of the major updates that could have things that they're deprecating or breaking changes, those happen every 6 months. So April and October, those releases. October, you might be familiar with, is when they typically release the update for GP. And generally speaking, we have about 2 months in general. We can extend it for extenuating circumstances, but we've got 2 months to get you from 19 to 20, 20 to 21, et cetera, during that time frame. And the process is super easy, but very much like you might be used to from the GP world. We can easily clone your environment in the Business Central world. It's simply from that admin screen I showed earlier. We clone it into a sandbox. We schedule the update. Microsoft does the update, and then we test just like we would in the GP world, and essentially schedule the same thing over in production. So that can be as formal or informal as you like. We have some clients who have a very vanilla Business Central environment, and they do their upgrades a little bit less formally, and those that have maybe more customizations that we do, much like a GP upgrade, except behind the scenes, Microsoft is performing the update, so that certainly makes things a little bit easier. But typically, in that case, we're also helping update customizations. That's one thing that we take on as an organization. If you've done a customization with us, that's built, that keeping that up to date is built into the support plan. So we're typically seeing right now two types of moves. Uh, some organizations, and we'll kind of get into the motives as well, right? Some organizations are making the move because they are ready to re-engineer some of their processes. And instead of making that investment into GP currently, they've decided to make that investment into their next platform in the Business Central world. So that's we've got an example a little bit later where one organization, they had three different systems. You know, one system to manage their kind of production and one system to manage purchasing and inventory, and one system GP that were all integrated, but they wanted a little bit more tightly integration because they all are so interdependent on each other, and so that was a re-engineer type of scenario. And we have others who are looking for more of a status quo. You know, they maybe have, as an organization, have chosen cloud as their primary strategy, and so they're maybe trying to change as little as possible, or maybe re-platform now, and then they have other major goals later on. So there's, generally speaking, those are the kind of the big, broad, overgeneralized categories. And so we've got one example here where YMCA moved from GP to Business Central, and they were more into the closer to the quick shift.
We were using software from Microsoft, the same vendor, but it did not have the capacity to do the 1099s because we had elected not to stay current with the software versions. I looked at what it would cost us to just get current with Great Plains and compared that to what it would cost to switch to a newer piece of software. And ironically, it was very similar in price just to get current with Great Plains as it was to switch to Business Central. I knew a couple of people who had used Business Central and they were highly favorable about it. So the need to get current, price being about the same, really made me start looking for some vendors who could help us install Business Central.
Dina was mentioning that they, one of the triggers for them to move, so they were overall on GP, and they elected not to keep up with their annual enhancement, and so they were upgrade to the latest version, I should say, and so like the 1099 thing, which I think a number of organizations here are probably pretty familiar with that 1099 NEC change. That was kind of a big trigger for them. So they really looked at replatforming, but then in solving that 1099 NEC issue for them. And then later on, they went on to do other things like workflow. And then UCI, United Controls International, but they were more in the re-engineer category. And so they were the organization I mentioned earlier, where they had three disparate systems. And because of that, there were lags in data between the three different systems.
So the position here, what had happened is they had three islands of automation, if you will, three systems. That one was financial, which was GP, and they had a customized workflow process for the middle, and it was just the workflow. And it had very limited communication with GP, so a lot of the that had to be done, the financials, some of it had to be posted to GP manually. And then there's also separate document management systems. So all three were separate. They should have been talking to each other transparently, if you will, but it was nowhere close to that. And that is what was causing a lot of the headaches here. They had been working with that setup for about 10 years, and they pretty much had it with it. It was a struggle. The two departments that were suffering the most were purchasing and shipping and receiving, because they had to receive parts in one system and transfer to another, and purchasing had to cut parts in orders in one system, post it to GP. It was duplicate work, and those two particular departments were bogged down.
So let's maybe talk a little bit about the process. Um, So first off, typically we would strategize together first, and the strategy is, deciding things like, is this more of a quick shift? The understanding the whys, and we'll get into some of the triggers and some of the whys in just a moment. But really kind of uncovering kind of what makes sense for your organization. Um, and understanding what would sort of be in that scope as well. But just really starting with that big picture, uh, and is it a board directive to be more cloud focused? Is there a big process that needs to be re-engineered, or maybe is ad hoc currently, and that's the reason why? Or is there a consolidation of applications? Those are sort of the big picture strategies that can maybe drive some of the things throughout the process. The second is really in that more discovery and planning. So that's when we're sort of really turning over in more detail what's to be expected, and make sure it is the right platform and the solution is kind of lined up. So if you're in an organization um, uh, like UCI, there were add-ons and ISVs that were part of the GP platform that we helped evaluate. Did they make sense in the Business Central platform? How would they do some of the processes in Business Central with dimensions, with jobs, and really planning that out. And depending on the complexity, sometimes that's a small project to do, and it's a collaborative project with your organization and Copus, and maybe even some other partners to really plan that out. For other organizations like the YMCA, because it was a little bit more straightforward, there were a couple of ISVs we had to make decisions on, but we help you do that, and that can all be done in kind of a lead up to an implementation project, so not necessarily a separate project. Then we get into the implementation, and we do call it an implementation because Dynamics 365 Business Central is a different platform than Dynamics GP. Because we know both systems really well, we try to make that as easy as possible. It's in Microsoft's best interest to make that switch as easy as possible. But it is a project, and so costs need to be budgeted and planned, and the whole project planned and everything. So, and that's sort of the meat of the project. For on and specifically on the Copa side, when it flips back over and becomes sort of the another time when your organization is really heavily involved is in that user acceptance testing process. So if you've ever gone through, our the full GP upgrade process that we do, user acceptance testing is a really critical piece during your original implementations of GP. User acceptance testing is really critical. That's partly to make sure that everything works the way you want it to work, but also it's another chance to continue to be more familiar. It is a new system, so we want to continue to drive both adoption and familiarity, so that you feel really comfortable. Um, and then we go live. So we plan to go live for a maintenance window, and so we have rollback plans, et cetera. So that's very risk adverse, and we are doing things safely. And then we roll into the support. And one critical piece that we know is that month end help on that first month end. So in addition to being very available right after the go live, as that's usually the highest incidence of support, we know that helping you get through that month end close, since those are new processes, are really important. So, what are some of the things, and these are probably things that, as leaders and project managers and folks who have gone through ERP implementations, these aren't necessarily anything new. But what are the things that either that can make ERP migrations challenging? These are some of the key ones. If things work a little bit differently, or you want to re-engineer, really spending the time to map out those processes so we have our I's dotted and our T's crossed. We really put a big emphasis on training, and so deciding with your organization if it's train the trainer or end user training. That's certainly an important decision, but making sure whichever decision you make on that you have people at your organization that that feel comfortable with Business Central, and from what we're hearing from our clients that have made that switch, and from the consultants that are supporting them, that 2 months to 3 months time frame is really when they really hey, I'm okay, I feel good now, and I feel really comfortable. So that's about when um, we really see some the kind of comfort, really just kind of feeling great there. Mapping the data. So we know the GP database really well, and we've got scripts to do so. But as you start to look at either data in other systems, and like we mentioned in the UCI scenario, or data in so your add-ons or ISVs, we want to plan that out and know where that's going to go. Make decisions on what data you do need. The more data and the more granular that we bring over, obviously, the more professional services and costs that may apply. And then integrations; those are also another key ones. A lot of them are very easy. We've seen, for instance, Smart Connect, where just remapping. We have scenarios where companies have gone from maybe more custom integrations to something that's a little bit more Excel based, and then sometimes and kind of our um, most sort of formal integrations. If there's not a product out there that does it, then we're going to that API basis. So that's an evaluation criteria. So I mentioned earlier about training. So part of both the project as well as our ongoing support is about making sure that your organization, the folks at your organization, feel really comfortable with Business Central long term. And so I mentioned that we've got people who know both GP as well as Business Central, and they're helping kind of map what you did in the GP world over into the Business Central world, so that it's coming from somebody who used to always do things in GP and have kind of retuned themselves to the Business Central world. So that's the big part, and then also our support programs. We really want to make sure that we heard that and we know that in the GP world, because it is an ad hoc support plan, that there is occasionally some apprehension in reaching out because the meter's running, so to speak. And so as we designed our support programs in the Business Central world, that was a really important thing to me about wanting to be there and be available for our clients, so that it helped us keep our finger on the pulse, and not that we don't support self-reliance and being self-sufficient, because we absolutely do. That's really key. But we do want to be there and be don't want you to feel like there's any friction between reaching out to us. So we've definitely seen where our GP clients are feeling comfortable after the move, and so we're proud of that, and we're happy with the effort that they've put in, and so that's certainly something that we're grateful for and appreciative of.
Adam, would you say that the Copus's support plan around Business Central is something that's unique specifically to Copus?
I have not seen there are some other partners that have support models that are similar. I know that there are partners that are kind of experimenting with different support models. Um, Ours has been something that, as we are both, I'd say, in the partner space, there's like cooperation. We go to the same conferences, and we certainly help each other out, and but we also compete against each other respectfully. And so there's we've certainly seen where our support model has been pretty attractive to prospects in that arena. Good question. So before we get into maybe some of the triggers, um, one of the things that we start to think about is some of the investment that both a GP, kind of maintaining GP, as well as moving to and beginning to support Business Central. So a lot of times we're working up some spreadsheets with you. It's going to be different for everybody because what everybody, each organization spends on these types of categories is very different depending on the size of your and complexity of your organization and the things that you're utilizing. But these start to kind of put some lanes in place, so that as you're making a decision, you have some of the investment numbers to assist. So in general, for instance, licensing costs um, for Business Central, if you're current on your GP enhancement, then you can either move straight to a 40% discount on Business Central licenses for whatever you need, or at your renewal time, you can actually purchase the same amount of Business Central in dollar value per year as your GP enhancement, and you can get both licenses. So we see organizations that might be moving kind of in the middle of their enhancement cycle. They might choose to go with the first one, or those that maybe have fewer users than their total annual. We've certainly seen scenarios where the licensing cost for for Business Central is smaller than the licensing costs for the enhancement costs for GP. So there's some kind of decision points there that can help your make a decision if you do go that way. Um, then certainly upgrades. So as we start to do these comparisons, and I've got an example here in a moment, upgrades are built into both the model, the Microsoft model, and our support plan. So those become predictable costs. So there's no additional cost for an upgrade in our model. In the GP world, to sort of try to get some apples to apples, we've basically spread the cost of a traditional upgrade across 3 years. Some companies go 4 years, some go 5, some go 2. So these are all kind of levers to dial in. Support in the GP world is ad hoc, so you can look back at your support costs. But that's not just support for GP, but could be hosting support. It could be other things. And in the support model for Business Central, it tends to be flatter because we've designed it that way. Hosting and physical servers and all that kind of good stuff, and then backups. What are you spending on backups? Obviously, we had or not obviously, but I think many of us in both from a client's perspective, us in the industry, MSP providers, certainly on the high alert for malware and crypto, and so we're certainly seeing companies invest more in backup strategies in the GP world because of how critical that data is, and in the BC world, um, there are the cost of that tends to be lower. So I have a very let's call it contrived example. So all these numbers are highly variable, but again, just trying to start to put some real dollars into that. That you might dial that up for your particular scenario or dial it down. But the big thing I wanted to draw attention to is um, that these are sort of annualized costs, and again, very admittedly contrived. Um, the thing that I would say is that we're not seeing companies move to Business Central to save to to save money annually on their ERP overall costs. That's not the reason why people are moving to Business Central on average. Do we have some scenarios where um, an organization might be pretty behind on a GP upgrade, and you know there some maybe some factors involved where the cost of uh, staying on GP is in the same ballpark as maybe a move to BC, and then now the numbers are starting to say, okay, well, we would save a little bit of money in the Business Central world. Yes, but generally speaking, we're seeing organizations move for other reasons, which I've got another slide for. So the reason why I wanted to bring this up is just to kind of put some real numbers behind this from um, a perspective of how maybe we would go about kind of looking at both sides. So licensing, like I mentioned, pretty similar. Use the $42 per user per month um, versus your maintenance costs. Upgrades in general, our standard upgrade that companies do every 3 years, or depending on their timing is in and around the $10,000. That's about average. Support is very widely varied. That's definitely something that's a little bit more to your organization. And then in the support world in Business Central, it's a little flatter. Um, and we tend to see just a couple of different types of buckets. There's no hosting or server costs. That's all. It's a software as a service. No professional services from any MSPs around that. And the backups you do get around 30 days of point in time recovery. And so like when you look at something like a VM backup for Axient. So again, some companies use something like this. You may have other things, but these are sort of the buckets that we tend to see. And you can certainly update this with your own costs, and we're certainly happy to help because your certainly your GP and Business Central license is going to be very widely depend on your configuration. But overall, I think the big thing I wanted to mention is it's not from a wholesale, we're going to save this much per year and it's going to justify that cost. That may be the case, but there's probably some more context for your specific organization. Now, what are some of those triggers? We mentioned re-engineering a process. So consolidating applications that are exterior to GP, sometimes an upgrade or renewal. So I mentioned an organization being maybe pretty far back on their upgrades, and that path to modern lifecycle might be a little bit longer, and then even being moving into the modern lifecycle, which is Microsoft's new lifecycle model that started with right after the GP 2018 release, so 2019 and beyond. That's the 18.x, so 18.1, 18.2. Their new support model is upgrading every year. So what we've done in that case for our GP clients is we're working with clients who have virtual machine and VM snapshot capabilities to be able to do closer to a in-place upgrade so that they have a proper rollback procedure. But if your organization has multiple external applications, complex, that really need to be thoroughly tested for every upgrade, then that may be not the best strategy in that case. And so, um, technically, to be on modern lifecycle in the GP world, now you're talking about a yearly upgrade that maybe you're budgeting every 3 years before, or every 4 years. So those are some of the things that start to weigh in. Certainly, a hardware refresh is another trigger that we're seeing for organizations. Some are one that's not even listed is maybe a executive team, leadership, board strategy to be cloud first. So we've seen that as well.
Adam, could you speak on maybe like when, like from a timeline perspective, if you're considering a move from GP to BC, when's really the ideal time, or is there one?
So it kind of depends on the complexity of your move, but uh, one of the strategies that uh, we've worked with clients on isn't around also um, that licensing model I mentioned earlier. So we saw some organizations choose to do the renew their GP with GP enhancement with Business Central purchase. And so they were able to essentially keep all their licensing costs for GP steady while they did that switch. And so they've got 3 years to choose to do that or switch to the other model at the end of that process. So some of that has to do with your renewal and the length of the move. If you're, if it's a re-engineer like in the United Controls scenario, then that may be more of a longer process. And so the exact timing of that is maybe less important. So a couple of things that we're looking at in the future is certainly scheduling a strategy session with your account manager, with Travis and myself, or Heather and myself. Certainly, we tap some of our consultants to talk through that as well. And then also, for those who haven't seen Business Central, we're going to do a demo of Business Central a little bit later in August. And so we can start to expose you, if you're interested, to kind of just seeing what it's all about, and we'll demonstrate some of the things that we talked about as differences. in that session. That we can, if there are any other questions, hopefully this was helpful to everyone. I certainly appreciate your time. Happy to have you.